Hello, and for me it's good morning. Uh, Whenever you're watching it is fine. Um, First, Daimoku Sancho. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you so much for joining me. Um, for those who may have I've had a lot of new subscribers to this channel, so I want to reiterate something that I think I said very early on. That was quite a while ago. Um, my purpose in creating these videos and posting these informations of my research and sometimes my writings on subjects on my resource website at threefoldlotus.com. Well, here's what I don't want to do. There's a lot of videos on YouTube that have the tendency of either orating their opinion on a specific teaching, some of which I do in a way in all of this as well, on certain basic concepts. But there's something in my agenda I think that's uniquely different from everything else that I've found, and it's what motivates me to. This is my bodhisattva practice, if you will. I'm in a remote area where there's not a lot of Buddhism, although I do get people coming into my school with questions and so forth. And sooner or later, I'm laughing because I have an anecdote about this, but basically, I'm a bodhisattva practice. My bodhisattva practice is more about getting people to self-actualize. So the Buddhism is a very self-motivated practice, period. It's not mystical. It doesn't require, faith, like the Western word faith. It's used in a lot of English translations, and it's just plain wrong. Um, After you read enough sutras on your own, you can easily replace that word faith, which is incorrect, just by reading other translations like this one. Uh, and it comes through very strongly after just a bit of study that Shakyamuni was talking about developing a strong mind of conviction and determination. That's not faith. Or the word that's often used is resolve, to achieve a resolve. All of this is earthbound. All of this is experientially learned, experientially known. It's proved through our experience and our observational skills, not by being beat over the head with something that cannot be understood or cannot be proved or cannot be experienced. Okay. Buddhism is very, very earthbound. So anyway, sorry, that's a tangent. Uh, Again, that tangent is because of the style of assistance or facilitating that yes, teacher, you could say I'm a teacher, but my teaching isn't authoritarian. My teaching isn't, I tell you information and you better learn it, by God. Uh, you know, um, what I'm trying to do is not only regurgitate what a sutra says, for instance. You can do that on your own. But I think there's an far too easy and very prevalent problem of sorts, in that when you start reading, and even after a bunch of study, you can get so lost in the language of 2,700 years ago, or 2,000 years ago, or 1,000 years ago, or heck, 100 years ago. It sounds like poetic. And what do we get when we read poetry? We don't really get a solid line of information or direction. What we get is feelings. which is something Buddhism is all about getting rid of. In other words, emotional states. So what I endeavor to do is, yeah, I'll read the sutra to you, but what I want to do is convert the knowledge in that sutra or in certain statements to a contemporary modern understanding. Uh, that, and like I did with the Virmalakirti, and I think I did it to a degree in the Lankavatara Sutra when I discussed those online. I want not only that you learn what the sutra says or means, uh, and not only what my definition of it, but I am all about giving you tools to better understand how the sutras work. How can you read the sutra and get the meaning? How can you discover for yourself information that maybe I didn't even talk about that's held within the sutra? Because you'll better understand how to translate the language of the sutras into your own modern experience. So you can see that it's not something foreign that you have to ingest, but something foreign that by understanding the meaning of it, you can find existence in yourself so that you can immediately apply that as knowledge, not just information, but knowledge that you can grasp and therefore uh, connect meanings and purpose and conviction, because that's what we're all trying to do, is achieve a resolve and achieve a conviction that by its own nature makes us more determined to explore it and understand it. Okay? That's the long description that a lot of English translator wants to do. Oh, that's faith. No. It's far more applicable and contemporary, real grasping and understanding to move forward. Faith is that you can get on the roof. Buddhism is about how the ladder works. So you actually do get on the roof. You don't just dream about it and hope somebody puts you there. Okay? Sorry. I'm pretty passionate about that. All right, so that's 8 minutes burned up already. I was hoping that this might be the conclusion to the Lotus Sutra discussion, but I shouldn't limit myself that way because I don't want to limit you. So the reason I separated this out, kind of worked out that way anyway, is that I'm now on what you would call chapter 16 on most of the translation from the Kumarajiva into the Chinese. This by H. Kern was a translation from late 1800s. He was English, and he tried to minimize the wordiness. And so you can see just by the thickness of this book compared to let's see, how many pages is this? It's less. It's just a little over 200 pages, and most of you are going to have some version of the sutra that's 400 to 600 pages. That's not because he left stuff out. It's just, well, a little bit. It's just that his translation is a little more direct, and he doesn't have the supporting or the introduction and the final sutras that make up the threefold Lotus Sutra. This is just the Lotus Sutra. Anyway, I kind of like the simplicity of it, and I don't mean to denigrate it by saying simplicity. I just mean it's more direct, and you can see the language is a little bit more raw about the meaning, which I think is helpful. Although you can see more easily where the Church of England kind of penetrates his thinking, because he does use words occasionally like faith. But they really glare in this translation because they're not couched in all of this other rhetoric. Do you see what I mean? So that's a long way of saying that at that time they only recognized 27 chapters of the Lotus Sutra. The 12th chapter didn't become inserted uh, between after the 11th. The 12th chapter of this time was actually what is now the 13th chapter. Um, so this is the 27th chapter Lotus Sutra. Most translations are the full content of 28. So you have the 14 early chapters as the provisional teachings, final teachings, and the latter 14 represent the um, essential teachings. Okay, um, so this is where Shakyamuni just finally puts the stamp on. Now you have the teachings with everything you've learned before, including in this book, the first 14 chapters still being somewhat preparatory to then slamming the door, so to speak, and saying, now this is it. There is no beyond this. This is the final ultimate truth that I have been training you for. So it's incredibly important. This is one of the reasons the Lotus is of such a high place in the order of the teachings. I have here a document Nichiren wrote about the placement of the Lotus Sutra. And I want to read some, if not all of that to you as well, just because the point of all of this has been, again, to show you how to study and how the sutras work, and why the Lotus Sutra holds its highest position. Because just plainly speaking, a tremendous amount of the practicing Buddhist population um, don't understand that the Lotus Sutra is at its place because it is the encapsulating kind of top on the jar of all of the teachings before it. Most people, even temples, even priests, high priests today, talk about the Lotus Sutra as though it was just another in the teachings. They don't understand the path of the teachings is, again, a lot like mathematics. The Lotus Sutra does not stand on its own. It is the culmination of all the teachings. That's different. You can't just crack open a book and say, okay, calculus, let me learn it. If you don't understand algebraic equations or how numbers and fractions work, you won't get anywhere. You open a book of quantum theory or quantum mechanics and try to understand the equations. You're not going to get it. It's built on all of the previous study, mathematics, algebra, geometry, trig, so on and so forth. And that's precisely how sutras came about. They're translations of sermons that took many, many years. All of Shakyamuni's enlightened life, after he turned 30, all he did was teach until he was into his 80s. And there's a system that he used to bring the disciples' awareness and capacities up above the capacities, regular capacities of the common folk. Okay? So he starts pretty brutal, and as he awakens people to understanding their mind body and how their mind works, he keeps challenging them more and more and more. And finally he gets to the Lotus Sutra, and he says, okay, now, and in the Provisional Lotus Sutra, he doesn't talk a whole lot about how to be a bodhisattva. He just assumes this is where you are in your practice. So a lot of people read the Lotus Sutra and they really don't understand because it doesn't have direct engagement with how to practice. It just says practice, and this is what your mindset should be, and this is how you do it. Well, not how you do it so much as he keeps talking about the situation of being a bodhisattva and the awakening that you're shaping, trying to shape our thoughts on how to connect with it, right? So if you haven't read the Perfection of Wisdom, or the Surangama, as I started to talk about, or the all the other Mahayana texts, you're not really prepared for the Lotus Sutra. And that's the biggest point I want to make in all of this series, is that if you're following a group or a Buddhist sect that doesn't clue you in on that, you may fall away from Buddhism because you just won't know what you're doing. You won't know how to apply it. You'll just blindly do it. And a lot of sects actually believe that that's all you need to do. And they may be right. A lot of people just need a connection to a Gohonzon and chant. And the problem is that after you go through your first year of practice and you see all these miraculous changes in yourself, you're gonna be arrogant. You're gonna develop your ego as well, and I've seen this over and over and over and over again. You get to a point where you see all these changes, and you go, okay, so yeah, well that's great, and then you just take it for granted, and then you chant for a while, and you don't see those big woo changes in your face, and you go, I don't need to do this, and you walk away. That's super tragic. But if somebody was there to give you a hand and say, hey, there's a lot more to this than you know. Study this. Look at this. You might savor that. You might just go into it, because what a lot of those organizations do, when you ask them, well, why this and how this and why doesn't that, you'll get the same answer, like a drone. Just chant. Chant more. Chant now. Good opportunity to chant. I'm not trying to insult or hurt those people or say they're doing anything wrong. I'm just saying that in our day, with our minds, the way we think, we need more guidance. We need more hand holding. We need more, even those schools that I'm thinking of in my mind here, lay organizations and sects that promote just chanting, for instance. They're doing themselves a disfavor because they're allowing people to drift away. And they should be, the Bodhisattva way is to ensure other people's enlightenment. So you kind of dropping the ball. Anyway, that's my perception, okay? I'm not putting them down because they're working hard to do what they do. And I give them all the kudos in the world. I'm just defining why I'm unique, why I'm different. Is I want to reach out there to all of you who have questions, and I want to do my level best to answer those questions in a way that inspires you to look for your own answers in maybe a more efficient way. That's the Bodhisattva I want to be. Okay? So, a lot of you probably picked up on that just from watching my videos, because they're pretty informal. I don't try to act like I know more than anyone. You all know this stuff. You're all Buddhas. All I'm trying to do is clear away the sand and the veils and the draperies and the just outright don't knowingness. Ignorance is not a bad word. It just means you don't know yet. You got to open the curtains before you can see outside and capture all that beauty, right? So, I'm trying to be the grand curtain opener. Okay. All right. So let's get into it before I spend an hour just talking about me. That's useless. All right. So, lifespan of the Tathagata. Oh, perfect. Second paragraph. The Lord Shakyamuni, considering that the Bodhisattvas repeated their prayer up to 3 times, addressed them thus. And remember, prayer is also one of those English things from the Church of England. It's not prayer in the sense that when there's prayer, there's a desire to be assisted or to be given something. It's it's directed outside the self, as though the self wasn't worthy, but somehow by praying, some mystical force, entity, person, whatever, can give it to us. That's so opposite of everything in Buddhism. And Shakyamuni would have never used the word prayer. Okay. What we're doing is meditating. What we're doing is focusing our thoughts. What we're doing is contemplating an idea. If any of you have gone to a museum and looked at art, or a gallery and looked at art, it's not about counting the colors or hoping that the art will somehow, grow you an extra arm or make you smarter or whatever. It's about your relationship with the art. It's a communication. It's an inspiration. It's all within the self, right? So that's Buddhism. Buddhism is our communication and our relationship with our Buddha mind rather than our samsarically conditioned mind of ownership and self and other dualities. Start seeing that detached as a movie, and you'll discover where you really are is in the Buddha mind. Okay? So, he says, the force of a strong resolve, ta-da, which I assumed is such, young men of good family, and that this world, including God's men and demons, acknowledges. This is just different human characteristics. Now has the Lord Shakyamuni, after going out from the home of the Shakyas, arrived at supreme perfect enlightenment, on the summit of the terrace of enlightenment at the town of Gaya. Now, why is he stating this? I mean, he's been teaching for some 50 years, right? And this is in the second part, the essential teachings of the Lotus Sutra. Why is he making that statement? Okay, what he's stating, let me just clarify. I assumed is such that this world, again, this samsaric space of duality of self and other, in this world, including all of these different perceived aspects of man, again, in samsara, we see people as gods, Olympians, superstars, celebrities, demons, really evil people, acknowledges. What do they acknowledge in this samsaric mind? Now has the Lord Shakyamuni, now, in this time period, after going out from the home of the Shakyas, that he's labeled after Shakyamuni, great saint of the Shakyas, arrived at supreme personal perfect enlightenment. In other words, in this lifetime he arrived as enlightenment, right? You've all heard this story, right? This has been throughout the teachings. I went through asceticism, I sat under the Bodhi tree, and I achieved full enlightenment. He's restating it here. This is the folklore. On the summit of the terrace of enlightenment at the town of Gaya, I mean, he's now whittling it down to the exact spot. And then he says, but young men of good family, people who are practicing the Bodhisattva way, arhats, everybody else who's learning. The truth is, many 100,000 myriad of kotas of eons ago, I have arrived at supreme perfect enlightenment. What? What? Dude, we know your mother. We know your cousin. He's with you all the time, Ananda. We know your son, Rahula. So you have a wife. You had sex. You're human. But you're no longer a human. You went from Siddhartha Gautama, that guy that we know from the Shakyas, and went to this place and sat under the Bodhi tree, and there you transmigrated from Siddhartha Gautama to a fully realized apparition of the Buddha mind. We call Shakya, from the Shakyas, Muni, great saint of Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, Buddha Shakyamuni. We saw it happen in this lifetime. My dad was there, so on and so forth. And he's saying, not true. I actually became enlightened so far long ago that you can't calculate it. It's immeasurable. It's that long. It's longer than that long. Now everyone's sitting there like, what are you talking about? I mean, this is major. So far, you've been our most excellent guide, here to save all human beings from their own sufferings, taking us along the way to become like you, completely realized Buddha. And now you're saying you weren't here all along? Is that what you're saying? Or you were enlightened long before you were born, Siddhartha Gautama? What? What are you saying? Are you two people? This is really earth-shattering news. Okay? So now he's going to break it down. By way of example, young men of good family, let there be the atoms of the earth of 50, 100,000 myriad of codas of worlds. Let there exist some man who takes one of those atoms of dust and then goes in an eastern direction 50, 100,000 myriad of codas of worlds further on, there to deposit that atom of dust. Let in this manner the man carry away from all those worlds the whole mass of earth, and in the same manner and by the same act as supposed, deposit all those atoms in an eastern direction. Okay. You see, Buddhism, Shakyamuni does this constantly. And we in a modern world, until we go, what? Well, he's making his point. It's inconceivable. You can't, with your mind, grasp how long ago this was. Okay? So I'm going to skip a lot of that and get to some major points in here. He takes another opportunity to slam people who stop in the provisional world of teachings. The Lord having thus spoken, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Maitreya and the entire host of Bodhisattvas replied, they are incalculable, O Lord, those worlds countless beyond the range of thought. Not even all the disciples and Pratyeka Buddhas, O Lord, with their Arya knowledge will be able to imagine, weigh, count, or determine them. That's what I just said. But here we go. And this is the biggest thing I've highlighted in here, so it must have meant something to me, but certainly something to discuss with you all. From the moment, young men of good family, when I began preaching the law to creatures in this, to creatures in this Saha world, the samsarically conditioned mind of duality, the Saha world, and in 100,000s of myriads of kotis of other worlds, and when the other Tathagatas, Arhats, etc., such as the Tathagata Dipankara. Why does he mention Dipankara? Because in the conventional world, samsara, in his teachings previous to this, Dipankara was the Tathagata that he ran into many myriads of kotis of ago, that predicted his future enlightenment, the Shakyamuni. Now he's saying, we're going way back, So he's saying that this guy, Dipankara, and the rest, whom I have mentioned in the lapse of time, since he started preaching, from that moment have I, young men of good family, for the complete nirvana of those Tathagatas, created all that with the express view to skillfully preach the law. Everything I've talked about my life, how I became a Buddha, also about all of these other Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and everything they did, and your predictions of your becoming Bodhisattvas and Buddhas. Everything I've taught from the moment I started, well, not quite, yeah, from the moment I started teaching how to achieve this Buddha way, this Buddha mind. Everything I've taught you has been in a fashion of skillful means. Do you understand what skillful means? When you, how can I pick a good modern example? I always go to how we teach our children, but it applies also to teenagers and young adults and even us old codgers. Sometimes when we're taught how to behave in different societies, different cultures, but the teaching is always there. How do you teach a child not to touch fire? How do you teach a child not to run out in the street? How do you teach a child or anybody how to do something well and appropriate? Oftentimes, I mean, a lot of you out there go, let the kid put his hand in the fire, he won't do it again. That's a pretty harsh way to teach. In fact, that's not teaching at all. That's allowing an individual to learn for themselves. They self-teach. I have a lot to say on that subject alone. I think we all self-teach. And that's why I teach in the manner I do, because I don't believe I'm teaching you anything. What I'm trying to do is open your eyes up and your thoughts and your mind and give you a moment to think for yourself what it is that will help you know more, even if it's through me being confusing, because I'm not important in this. You are. Okay? So, this is what he's saying. He's saying that I've told you all these stories and incredible events, and not just, I mean, he's used folklore. He's used the local folklore that exists. He's used teaching parables. He's never hidden those. But even the teaching about the things that people actually were listening to as though they were fact, he's saying they were just fact in order to get your mind more evolved. Facts for you to consider and think about how things work. Facts that at this point you should be discarding because the stories weren't important. What you learned from the meaning of the stories, far more important to your mental development, right? Um, you can see that, well, I don't want to go to the fables again, but that's an obvious use of skillful means. Fables are the way we teach morals and ethics, right? So what the Buddha is saying, what Shakyamuni is saying now in the Lotus Sutra and the essential teachings is, gotcha, but not in a negative way. I just need you now to let go of a lot of the attachments that you have to those stories. And once again, like he did in the Lankavatara really strictly, but he says it over and over again in different ways in almost all the sutras that I've read. At some point, there's some indication that don't latch onto the words and the stories. And that's all provisional. Latch on to your own discovery of what it means. That's the important jewel of knowledge there that is actually growing your understanding. Even though you may not be paying attention to that, it's happening. But in your Saha world mind, in your samsaric identity mind, mind of distinctions and self and other and duality, you're still hanging on to that story, that thing. And if it helps you understand, fine, but understand also that's unreal. That's just a tool, a mechanism for you to get to fundamental truth. Okay? And here he is saying it, that my own story, my own origin story, was something for you guys to grasp onto, because that's what your mind is right now in samsara. I gave you a good footing so you could continue to grow, but now I'm telling you that footing, it's mirage. It was just skillful means to get you to here. Another reason why the lotus is put on top of all the others. You see? Does that make sense? I spent all my time teaching you about every step and how you can move from one step by lifting your one foot onto the next step, resting, and then shifting your weight onto that other foot so that you could then pull up the right foot, and you could either rest at that step or you put more energy into it and get that right foot onto the next step so that then you could shift your weight and go to that. And then he gets to the Lotus Sutra and he goes, you've just climbed a ladder. Do you see? Now step onto the roof, as the ladder was just there to get you here. But don't throw the ladder away. Just understand that when I taught you how to move your feet and shift your weight and do all that stuff, that was just to help you learn how to climb the ladder so you could get to the top. I don't know. I hope that analogy works for you. If I come up with better ones, I'm sure I'll let you know. Okay? So let's go on. Skillfully preach the law. Again, young men of good family, the Tathagata considers the different degrees of faculty and strength of succeeding generations, reveals at each generation his own name, reveals a state in which nirvana has not yet been reached, and in different ways he satisfies the wants of different creatures through various dharmaparyayas. This being the case, you young men of good family, the Tathagata declares to the creatures whose dispositions are so various and who possess so few roots of goodness, so many evil propensities, I am young of age, monks. Having left my father's home, monks, I have lately arrived at supreme perfect enlightenment. When, however, the Tathagata, who so long ago arrived at perfect enlightenment, declares himself to have but lately arrived at perfect enlightenment, he does so in order to lead creatures to full ripeness and make them go in. Therefore, have these dharmaparyayas have been revealed, and it is for the education of creatures, young men of good family, that the Tathagata has revealed all dharmaparyayas. And young men of good family, the word that the Tathagata delivers on behalf of the education of creatures, either under his own appearance or under another's, either on his own authority or under the mask of another, all that the Tathagata declares, all those dharmaparyayas spoken by the Tathagata are true. So he's saying, I'm telling you, all of them were provisional, skillful means of teaching you. But don't think that any of them weren't true. They were all true. They're just skillful means. They're just ways of nurturing you along your education. So I don't know how this could be more clear. It's wordy, so you can get lost in the words, attachment to words, but he's being very clear. There can be no question of untruth from the part of the Tathagata in this respect, for the Tathagata sees the triple world as it really is. It is not born, it dies not. It is not conceived, it springs not into existence, it moves not in a whirl, it becomes not extinct. Please note that part of that sentence. To all of you who continually ask or think, or I had the question asked directly on Quora this morning, somebody saying that, or asking, is Buddhism just basically a cult of death? It's because if you don't read fully and carefully, you can start to get nihilistic about this, because you get stuck on the no self and no soul and that aspect. That's a misunderstanding. Those teachings are talking about being attached to the creation and dissolve of something. The creation and dissolve of something, the arising and dissolving of something, is only occurring as an idea, a thought, an action in your mind. It's not really born. It's a fiction that's provisional, if you will. And so, if anything, that teaching that you can easily see over and over again in the sutras, you can miss the idea that what the Tathagata is teaching is to let go of attachment to things, phenomena, to relieve your anxiety and your attachments about them so you don't suffer, all the while focusing more on the immediate moment of thingness in a much deeper, more appreciative way for the fact that it exists, but only in moments, not in perpetuity. It's not something to attach to, it's something to deeply appreciate. It's precious, this lifetime. It's precious, but it's only precious in the moment you experience it, not in the moment that you decide it must be. Because then you're attached and you can't let it go. And then your mind becomes all about the freaking attachment and you never fully experience the joy of it. Do you see? No, I don't hear anyone talking about this when I watch videos. They're all talking about trying to understand how nothing exists. Well, yeah, after hearing that 1,000 times, you're going to say, well, I guess that means to be a living dead, you know? No, that's a misinterpretation. What it is a concerted effort to, and it's very difficult, to get your mind to let go of the idea that something continues to exist, that it's permanent. Just experience it. That's where all the joy is. And if you just, and then, oh, that moment's so precious. And when it goes away, you just look at the next moment as so precious. Instead of going, don't go away, don't go away, don't go away. Where are you? Now you see where all the emotions come out? That's where your suffering is. Wanting each moment to stay the same. Just appreciate the moment. And when the next one comes, surprise, it's Christmas again. Bad example, but I think you know what I mean. Okay. And I mean, talk about a bomb to drop on people. They've been following you for, 20, 30 years? Or 20 years, 20 some years? And then you go, oh, by the way, you get this? A lot of people still today don't. That's why we still have so many sects. Because people are still clinging. They don't want to do this. So this is I can see why the essential teaching is in the second part of the sutra. Not why it's there, but why it's labeled that. Because, oh my goodness, what a revelation. What a very difficult thing to understand and put into practice. And that's what will get us into the next video, because I'm already at 45 minutes. So I'm going to spend a little more time talking about this. But I really, really, really want you to get how significant a statement he's making with in just one little chapter that revolutionizes all Buddhist thinking. He's brought you to the point where you're ready to hear this. This is why now he's going quantum physics. Okay? Because he's taught you algebra, he's taught you calculus, he's taught you quantum. Now, here's what all of that is to help you understand is boom, this string theory. Okay, let's go on a little bit further and then I'll close. There's a few things in here I want to go over in the remaining chapters that are good, but this is the guts. Okay. Um, all right. The Tathagata sees the triple world not as the ignorant, common people. He sees things always present to him. Indeed, to the Tathagata, in his position, no laws are concealed. In that respect, any word that the Tathagata speaks is true, not false. But in order to produce the roots of goodness, in other words, for you to increase your capacity to learn, who follow different pursuits and behave according to different notions, he reveals various dharmapayayas, people with different natures, different capacities, with various fundamental principles. See, everything he's taught is fundamental. It's not the pinnacle, as this is. The Tathagata then, young man of good family, who've been learning, does what he has to do. The Tathagata, who so long ago was perfectly enlightened, is unlimited in the duration of his life. He is everlasting without being extinct. The Tathagata makes a show of extinction on behalf of those who have to be educated. And even now, young gentlemen of good family, I have not accomplished my ancient bodhisattva course, and the measure of my lifetime is not full. Nay, young men of good family, I shall yet have twice as many 100,000 myriad kotas of eons before the measure of my lifetime be full. I announce final extinction, young men of good family, though myself I do not become finally extinct. For in this way, young men of good family, I bring all creatures to maturity, lest creatures in whom goodness is not firmly rooted, whose capacity hasn't been educated and furthered to the point where they can understand this, who are unholy, miserable, eager of sensual pleasures, blind and obscured by the film of wrong views, should by too often seeing me take to thinking, the Tathagata is staying, and fancy all that is a child's play, lest they be thinking we are near that Tathagata should fail to exert themselves in order to escape the triple world and not conceive how precious the Tathagata is. He uses the word precious. Hence, young men of good family, the Tathagata skillfully utters these words. The apparition of the Tathagata, monks. I mean, how much more plain can he make it? He's an apparition. The Buddha mind is real. The Buddha person is an apparition. It's a device to help teach you. It's another of the skillful means. Is precious and rare. For in the course of many 100,000 myriads kotas of creatures may happen to see the Tathagata or not to see him. Therefore, and upon that ground, young men of good family, I say, the apparition of the Tathagatas, monks, he's calling them all monks, is precious and rare. By being more and more convinced of the apparition of the Tathagatas being precious or rare, they will feel surprised and sorry, and whilst not seeing the Tathagata, they will get a longing to see him. The good roots developing from their earnest thought relating to the Tathagata will lastingly tend to their weal, benefit, and happiness, in consideration of which the Tathagata announces his final extinction, though he himself does not become finally extinct. On behalf of the creatures who have to be educated, such young men of good family is the Tathagata's manner of teaching. When the Tathagata speaks in this way, there is, from his past, no falsehood. Okay, so you just heard him say the core message in a half dozen different ways. Once again, to recap, He's saying that occasionally the Buddha mind will instantiate itself as a human, but to communicate with that human and believe he exists in the world is to be fooled. Okay, it's what do they call it? A show. It's a show so that you as a human, we as humans, can feel a tangible, real presence. But that's only because of our deluded mind that we see self and other. That other is really it's us. The Buddha mind is something that not only is in all of us, but it's in all of us because it's what we are. Everything, sentient and non-sentient. From Einstein to blade of grass, we're all Buddha mind. The universe says, is, and I think a good modern word and concept for it is energy. You can read and watch videos on YouTube about the nature of energy, and they'll tell you over and over again, energy isn't a thing. It's a measurement. It's something that has to be there because without accounting for it, everything we do in physics, math, whatever, it falls apart. It's required. It's moved. It's displaced. There's a conservation of it. Where it goes back. Where it moves, it returns. There is energy. Now in Buddhism, energy is the source of all things, like E equals mc squared. There's a relationship between energy and matter is a form of energy. Now, science these days is really stuck on the other way around, that the fundamental of everything is matter, but they're struggling with it right now because even their equations to prove that demonstrate that 94% of the knowable universe, just this universe, is dark energy. What that means is energy has to be there, but we don't know how to quantify it. We don't know how to see it, read it, measure it, other than by everything else. And everything else can only be there if that's there. Like dark matter. They used to call it antimatter. But most of the universe we only know as physical as 4% of the entire makeup of the universe through very precise measuring. Anyway, that's 53 minutes, so we're almost on an hour. Please don't be afraid to comment under the video because I know I'm going through a lot of material here. I encourage you to read on your own. And my hope in all of this is that with my, I don't say, with my definitions and my help and my, my own musings about these teachings and their meaning, I hope they're useful to you to make you come up with your own, to make you go back and read this stuff and hear it differently, see it differently. I think now, at this point, you could read, like what I want to read out of Nichiren here, or the Lotus, or any other sutra, and have a greater, at least sensitivity, but insight into what is being said, so that your mind starts to connect the little dots, and you have more moments of, aha, I get that. But didn't he say over here, oh, now I get that too. That's how we really learn stuff, because with the tools of abstraction, we can teach ourselves. And this is the goal. So I hope that works for you. I'm going to sign off. And yes, there's going to be a follow-up video on the Lotus Sutra. So my last statement in the last video that it was the penultimate was inaccurate. So I think I need at least one more just to cover some closing things. The Lotus Sutra, after all, is the pinnacle of all the teachings. So to cut it short would be to diminish my helpful existence in your life. So I don't want to do that. Ask questions, email me, and I hope that you get all of this far beyond what I'm able to teach it and help me learn, teach myself more. That's what I appreciate about your questions. Thank you so much. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Stop button, stop button, stop button. Bye.